No, and beyond physical and mental engagement, I think also engagement in terms of service, finding out what you can do to get involved in your church, because the more invested you are in the ministry and in meeting other people, I think those interactions that you have, whether you're on a greeting team or if you're preparing the elements, if you do communion, or if you are just running slides, not just running slides is very important. I don't
But
want
in
to
your
demean
mind, just running slides.
Right. If whatever it is that you do, however little or big you think that role is, the fact that you now have hopefully a team with you with whom you can serve as well, that you have people that you are immediately accountable to during service to help ensure that other people are blessed by the Lord's word being spoken over them that Sunday morning or afternoon, whenever you have it. So it's certainly helpful. It's helped me a lot to realize that, for one, church doesn't operate with a one or two man show. It's more than just the pastor and whoever's, ushering people.
It's more than just the musicians.
It's more than just the musicians. It truly is a participatory event where it's the pastor's greatest joy when everyone's participating. And participating can be sitting, it can be standing, it can be being silent, it can be shouting. It's a lot easier to see when it's shouting, but certainly...
You can have your hands up or down or
Right.
this number.
And I think authentic worship is something that's so incredibly difficult to define, and it's something that kind of has to be assessed within your own heart, because I can look at somebody who seems very disinterested, but ultimately is contemplating very deeply the words that are being spoken. There was a message, actually a couple of messages I was listening to by Stephen Furtick, because I enjoy hearing him speak. He said, one of the biggest things I've learned in ministry is not to judge myself on your applause, because I used to think that your applause meant that I was preaching good. He said, no, it's when you're sitting quietly and not doing anything, and when you have your arms crossed, because what I've said has just convicted you in a way that you weren't willing to admit to yourself that you're actually engaged. And he said it's in the eyes, and you can tell when someone's looking at you or whether they're looking away or looking at something else. You can tell because there's an atmosphere in the room, and some of that's, the rhetoric and just making his point, but there's a lot of truth to it in that there's just different styles of engagement, and you don't want to be so shallow and superficial to say your hands have got to be doing this, your voice has got to be doing this.
Well, you see this all the time with couples where they're like, oh, I want you to look more affectionate, or I want you to look a certain way so that we look a certain way. And really,
Image.
It's kind of like, well, if he loves you, he loves you. He may not be hanging all over you, grabbing your arm and like your hand and just like all over you, but if he loves you, he loves you. And it's actions speak louder than words, but even more than that is like you said, the eyes. So it's something that we look for external validation, and we look for the most obvious sign of it. Likes on Facebook, where we literally quantify how much you are liked.
Yeah, that's a good word, because I think a lot of that comes down to even the conversation of authentic worship and what it looks like. You're assuming that authentic worship is something that you can see, right?
Yes.
You're assuming that it's a visual thing. You're assuming fundamentally that if somebody is doing something in physical space that looks like A, B, or C, that this is the definition of authenticity. And the eyes are the windows to the soul. That's really cheesy. And there's something in that, but mainly making the point again that you can be silent and still. God comes to you in a still, small voice. It doesn't always look like noise.
Yeah.
It's the posture of the heart, not the posture of your body.
Well, and we run a really big danger when we think that we can spot the true Christians, spot the true worshipers.
Yeah.
And maybe this happens in both directions.
It does.
Like if someone says,
Certainly.
how can they be seriously thinking about God if they're rolling all over the floor and because they're just so overwhelmed with emotion? Or if they have their hands raised up, how can they're acting like an idiot, to their perspective. How can they possibly be honoring God that way? And then on the other side, how can you be honoring God when you're just sitting there and looking like you're dead? Well, I've heard it from both sides, and both of them are wrong, because it's like, you can't tell if I'm worshiping authentically or not, because you're not living inside these the skull.
Right.